Hey y'all, it's me, your host, Coach Pilar Arthur Sneed. Thanks so much for joining me here for another episode of The Last 10th. I know I say it every single week, but this week I am super excited to welcome Nattalyee Randall to the show. Actor, filmmaker, ultrarunner, so many things. I don't know how she finds the time to do it all, but she does. We talk today about her 50-mile run for justice and protest, inspired by and mandated really by the tragic deaths of George Floyd, Ahmaud Aubrey, and so many others, of course, Breonna Taylor, during 2020. We'll talk a little bit about her upcoming documentary, The Race Against Race, currently in production. And we'll also talk about sobriety and how running can serve as a great support in that journey. So let's get started. Enjoy today's episode. Hey y'all, it's me, your host, Coach Pilar Arthur Sneed. I am so happy that you have joined me here today for another episode of The Last 10th. I am, and I know that I say it every single week, but I am super, super excited to have on the show today Nattalyee, who did and is doing a documentary film called The 50-Mile Run for Justice Protest. So I am just super excited that Nattalyee is here. Nattalyee is a ultra marathoner and actress and all around really, really amazing woman. So Nattalyee, thank you for joining me on the show today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, really good that you're here. So where I usually like to start with folks is I really like it if folks will tell me a little bit about themselves. So tell me a little bit about you, anything that you'd like to share, and most especially anything that I did not talk about in my very brief intro of you.
Yes, I'm Nattalyee Randall. I live in New York City. I've lived there a little over 8 years, and I moved there in 2014 for acting reasons. I'm an actor, and, I moved with the Broadway dream, of doing musical theater, and, I thank the Lord that I have been able to live my dream and perform musical theater all over the U.S. I was on a national tour with an a cappella group. We have an album on iTunes, and I've been able to, do commercials, voiceover, film. But I also am a runner, an athlete. I do OCR, obstacle course races, racing. I just recently started my ultra marathon journey.
Yes.
But, I have 250 milers under my belt. So
nice.
I'm feeling good, this year will bring so much more. And through all that, I started making this documentary that really was just going to document my weight loss, as I've lost a little over 100 pounds.
Wow.
And showing the average person, hey, you can run a marathon too. I'm an average person who lost weight and ran a marathon. But with everything that happened in 2020, it kind of turned the world upside down, and me, myself included. And I came up with this 50-mile run for justice protest where we ran 50 miles on November 1st, 2020. That was the day the New York City Marathon was supposed to be. And we raised awareness of 50 people who had lost their lives to police brutality, along with Ahmaud Aubrey, who, was basically shot down in cold blood. And just raising awareness of what's happening to Black and brown people. And we, dedicated a mile to each person. And I had 11 other cities join in with me. So the documentary will be highlighting that and just some of my running journey in general.
Wow. Wow, wow, wow. Wow. So
thank you.
That's amazing. I mean, literally from top to bottom, just amazing. So before we talk about the 50 mile run, let's talk about what motivated you, and besides your weight loss journey, but like when you said, okay, I'd like to lose weight. This is what I'd like to do. What gave you the idea that you would like to start running?
I am 7 years sober, and
Wow.
actually I'll be 7 years sober in a few days.
Wow.
Yeah, so
Congratulations.
thank you so much. In the beginning of my journey, the beginning of my sobriety journey, I actually gained like 55, 60 pounds within not even 2 years. And, of course, it's like looking at it, it's like we'd rather have you a little heavier than, have you drinking and doing all that kind of stuff. So I, one day went to the doctor and didn't even realize how heavy I'd gotten. And, I was almost 300 pounds. And I was like, oh, my gosh,
Wow.
Not that we need to judge anything based off of weight, but for me, that was an unhealthy weight to be for my body and what I do and what I'm capable of. So I started, just kind of, cutting out some food, some soda. And a friend of mine was like, you should try running if you really want to like lose your stomach, tone your body and all this stuff. And I was like, okay, I really want to get my stomach down, so I'll try running. And, when I first started, I was like, this is a nightmare, and I don't understand why anyone does this for fun.
From whence we all start.
I was like, whoo, I don't know how long this is going to work. But, I'll never forget the first time I ran 2 miles in a row. And it was pretty slow, but I still, just ran 2 miles in a row. And I was like, I like pushing myself, I like challenging myself and pushing these limits. And so I'm in an accountability group on Facebook, and some people were doing like 5Ks, 10Ks, and half marathons. And I was like, I'm going to sign up for this 10K, and whatever happens, happens. If I don't finish, I don't finish. But at least I got out there and tried. And, essentially I was hooked. The medals have a lot to do with it. I won the medal at it. But
Me too.
yeah, I was hooked. And from there, I never in a million years said I'd be, an ultra marathoner by any means.
Sure.
But it just, it skyrocketed from there.
Wow. So when was your first 10K?
My first 10K was actually on St. Patrick's Day in 2017.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, almost 4 years ago.
So I always like to joke because, I did my first 5K, and then a year, maybe it was like 2 years later, I did my first marathon. So I always like to say, well, that escalated quite quickly.
You're like, okay. That did.
I am in it I'm not in it to win it, but I'm in it anyway. Wow. So then you obviously kept going, kept running, and it's been something that seems like it's really benefited you. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah. It's just, it's like therapy at this point for me, because not that I don't get to drink, that's a choice I make, but because I don't drink, some people have a hard day and they're like, oh, let's just, go have some wine, like a couple glasses of wine or a beer. And since that outlet is no longer there for me, food was an outlet for me. When I got sober too, I became a little addicted to food. Like, it's like, let's have a pizza, let's go have Chinese food. And I'm not saying I still can't do that, but I wasn't doing it healthy. And so being able to find a healthy alternative to all of that, when people say running is not therapy, I'm like, I understand, because for me, after any workout I've done, I've never walked away being like, why did I do this? I'm in the moment when I'm doing it, I might be like, why am I doing it? But at the end of the race, I never once said, why did I do this? I should have been here. So it's just been so helpful and beneficial, and just being able to get other people inspired to run.
Absolutely.
Because, when you see someone my size, plus size runner, a little bigger, people think, well, if she's, close to 200 pounds doing a race, I don't see why I can't. And I'm like, you're right, because I started running when I was damn near 300 pounds, excuse my language. So I'm like, anybody can get up there and do it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I don't consider myself to be sober, but because I do have a drink on a few occasions now and then, but I don't drink nearly as much I mean, and when I say I don't drink nearly as much as I used to, like that's like an understatement. Because there's this one moment, two moments really. Once going out with my husband on New Year's Eve and just being completely and utterly blitzed out of my mind. And I had the fortitude in that moment to film the interaction with myself and my husband. And when I looked back on that, I just said to myself, my goodness, you are going to be 40, whatever it was I was going to be at the time. And I was just like, you are out here acting like this. And this is ridiculous that I should be acting like this. And I took a dry month in a February, I think it was like February of 2018 when I did it. And I took a dry month, and that was really hard. Like I was like, I just felt like I had come to this point where I was like at a place where if I didn't make a choice to curtail my drinking, then I was definitely going to wind up at the bottom of a bottle. So taking that dry month was like so important, because what happened is when I was running, I realized that I had been running with like a hangover 90% of the time, you know?
Oh gosh, I remember those. Yeah.
And so it was like a wake up, like it was like a wake up thing, like to get up one morning and go for a run and be like, oh my gosh, I'm like hydrated and I don't have a headache and my mouth is not like cotton. What is this new thing that I've got going on? You know what I mean? So
yeah,
it was like
seriously.
It was a reset. So like I identify with that very much. So what, brought you to your sort of moment of like, that's it? I mean, you don't have to say, talk about it in detail if you don't want to, but,
No, I'm totally fine with that. I actually just started a sobriety club on Clubhouse. I don't know if you have that app. Clubhouse is like the new...
I've been hearing about it.
Yeah, it's like basically Zoom with no faces,
right.
Or like a party line.
Sure.
It's called party lines, like a chat room.
Party lines, it's so 80s or 70s or something. I don't even know.
Right. So that's basically what it is. But I started a sobriety club on there because there wasn't one. But I'm pretty vocal about my sober story. And just I was kind of like, I never was someone who drank because I was depressed or sad. Or had anxiety, which those are all issues I have. And, looking deeper into it, that, was a little part of it. But I just love to party. I love to be, act crazy, act wild, dance on the tables and have an excuse to do it. I'm not saying I still don't dance on tables because, that can still be fun.
You can still be wild and not have a lot of drinks to do it. You just do it knowing full well you're doing it because you like it.
Yes. So, and living in New York City, I'll tell you that much, honey. If you got a drinking problem, that will speed it right on up, because I lived in a small town where it's like, if I'm drinking or something or drunk or having an issue, I can call someone, they'll be there in like 10 minutes to pick me up or whatever the case may be. In New York City, yes, you have the subway and everything, but there's a lot that's left more to the chance of, you riding a subway, and it's like, are you going to fall asleep and not get off on the right stop, or you end up in like the end of the subway line? I hear those horror stories of people who have woken up, where it's like the end of the line and they're actually like where it's like closed off and you have to call somebody to come like get you out of there. It's like kind of serious. So, that kind of stuff. And I was tired of being that drunk girl who was doing too much, falling all over the place. And it wasn't that I was necessarily a bad time, but I sure as heck by the end of the night was not the best time either. And I was also, spending a lot of money because, nothing is cheap there. So my bank account is very happy now. And,
that's right. What a wonderful thing.
So now I can leave my money a good way,
That's
I
right.
can pay to run instead.
That's right. That's right. And I also say that, running has sort of become an addiction, I think, but I feel like I'd rather have this addiction than my drinking addiction. I'd rather have that.
Hmm.
it's this is a much sort of like all told and all when all is said and done, this is a much healthier way to have that sort of outlet, I guess.
Yes,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Awesome, awesome.
absolutely.
Thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing. So fast forward, now we're in 2020. 2020 started out, you know, well enough, with
Hmm.
the exception of certain people who are no longer with us. Thank you.
Yes, thank you is correct.
With the exception of all that mess, that hot mess. Um, and COVID hits, and then we're all in quarantine, as everyone knows. And then Ahmaud Aubrey happens, and tell me
Hmm.
where you were at, I guess, sort of mentally, physically, spiritually, all that stuff.
Yeah, Ahmaud Aubrey, that was very impactful for me and kind of also changed the trajectory of my documentary because um, it happened like right before we got in the heart of quarantine. So I'm still running outside and whatnot, but it just made me think like when I come home to my town in Springfield, and like I said, my town, you know, in Illinois, it's pretty red except for Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
But it just made me second guess, like, if I come home, am I going to be okay to run outside, run down the street?
Mm.
Because in the video that we saw, it's like he was damned if he did, damned if he didn't. There was
Mm-hmm.
no way for him to get out of that. And it's scary to think that you could be dressed as a runner.
Mm-hmm.
And I talk about this in my documentary. I purposely get like, when I buy running gear, a lot of times I buy like flowery pants and
Mm.
pants that show like I am a runner.
Mm.
I might put on a shirt from a race that I've done. I wear a fanny pack.
Mm.
I don't let my headphones be turned up too loud
Mm-hmm.
because I don't want someone to be yelling at me and then thinking I'm ignoring them when in reality I'm just running and jamming out to my music.
Mm.
If I'm running in Central Park or running somewhere or running, in Prospect Park and I accidentally take a wrong turn and I don't know where I'm at and then I'm in a situation where it's like, well, wait a minute, So
Mm.
it just really made me rethink the way that, like a white person doesn't have to present themselves as a runner half
Mm.
the time. It's like we see them running, no one questions them, but you see someone who's close to 200 pounds running outside, it's like, well, what is she running for? Where is she going? What's
Mm.
happening? It's automatically like, is she robbing someone? Is she running away from someone? Which it's,
Yeah.
I mean, and it's crazy. I even have to say that, but it's like, it's your own people sometimes too. I was just talking about that where it's like, I run with a predominantly brown and black crew
Mm.
and a run crew in New York City.
Mm.
And for the most part, people are very supportive, but sometimes you have those people like, why are you black people, brown people running? I'm like, because I'm trying to show y'all that we run too.
That's
And this
right.
is half the issue.
That's right. That's right. Absolutely. Absolutely. So at what at what point did you decide to start making the documentary? And then obviously it transitioned after a little bit after Ahmaud Aubrey. When was the start of the making of the documentary?
So the documentary started actually when I ran the New York City Marathon for the first time in 2019.
Mm.
I, kind of was like, oh, I'm going to make this like little short film, like a weight loss film, just like, 2-minute film showing people like, hey, this is, the before me, the after me, I made it.
Yes.
And as I started putting money into it, my mom was like, well, why don't you actually make this, a film that you enter into festivals? And I was like, oh yeah, like why don't I make it into a documentary? Because I co-directed the film, but I have another director who I was like flying out to do it, and I was hiring a camera crew, and you start putting all this money into it, and I'm like, well, if I'm gonna put all this money into it, like let's make it something legit. And my co-director was like, well, this marathon that you did, that's awesome, but I think we can even push the envelope a little further. And I was like, okay, well, what do you mean? She's like, well, I don't know, like maybe you can do an Ironman, or maybe you can do like a 50-mile race, or something like that. She was shooting out all these ideas, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like I just barely am getting to a marathon. Like, you want me to look at an Ironman or a 50-miler? Like, what?
That just makes me think of, like, it's it's like mile 16 and then mile 21, when your brain is you're just basically like you were saying before, like, why am I here? Why am I here? Is this ever gonna end? And your co-director is like, you should just do more. You should totally do more. Basically. And you're like, do you know what's going on at these particular points in time when you're running? Do you have any idea?
That's legitimately what was happening. And as she's saying it, I'm like, well, I mean, I guess I can do a 50-miler. Like, I don't know. So I signed up to do a 50-miler. In February of 2020. The Rocky 50, I believe it's called, in Houston, Texas, around there. But I'm an actor, so I booked an acting gig, and it was 3 months long. And so I was like, well, I've got to do this. And it was in Texas, oddly enough. But I was there doing a show where I was being Aretha Franklin for 3 months. So wow. I was like, well, yes, and I was being Aretha Franklin and Nina Simone. So Aretha Franklin is like my hero. So, of course, I was like, I have to do that. So I did that. And then we were like, okay, well, let's just reschedule and do this race in Iowa in April. And I was like, great, and the whole COVID thing happened, and I was like, well, it got canceled. And I'm like, you know what, honestly, I was like kind of just done and threw the whole thing to the wind. And I was like, hey, at least I got some footage of me running this marathon, and it was a cool idea thing, whatever. I got very discouraged. And then when the whole George Floyd thing happened, and the Ahmaud Aubrey thing, but then the George Floyd thing kind of, put the nail in the coffin. My mom was like, you should kind of change your film to what's happening now. And I was like, that doesn't even make sense. Like, I was like, what am I supposed to say? Like, George Floyd, got murdered by a cop and I'm running. And I was like, I don't understand how those correlate. And then I started going to protests. And then someone who I look up to, Coffee, he's got Coffee Boy on Instagram. He started doing running to protest. That's the name of his Instagram page. And I was like, oh, wow, they're doing protests where they're running in protest of all of this. And I was like, you know what? I was like, you're right. I can actually turn this whole film around, and we're going to do a 50-mile Run for Justice protest. And originally I was going to do it by myself and just have my camera crew and my team there. And then, I was like, I was reading David Goggins' book, and we all know how hard he is. But he was just, I love him, but, he is hard.
He's hardcore, that guy. He's like, just when you think you've done something, you're like, oh, read David Goggins. You're not hard enough. Go harder.
I was like, oh my gosh, I'm reading his book, and he had said in there something, about like, why are you not doing this other thing? Like, what's stopping you? And he's like, are you scared of failing? Is it the fear that if people know that you're going to do this, that you're going to fail in front of them? And I was like, you're exactly right. I was scared that I wouldn't finish the 50-miler. I was scared that people would, point and be like, why is she doing this? Because I was trying to keep it under wraps that I was even doing these other 50-milers. I hadn't told, like, the general public. And I'm like, if I make this a national movement, I can't hide. Like, I'm going to be public. People are going to be like, did you finish the race? What's happening? And I just was like, oh my gosh. But eventually I was like, you know what? It's bigger than me. And even if I can't finish it, someone else will finish it. Because there were so many people who showed up that day to participate, because we broke it down into 9 segments where we stopped to pick up more people. And, I did finish the 50-miler. And I mean, and I think to myself, had I not gone public with it, I feel like I wouldn't have had that extra pressure that I did need, to be like, because there were 2 moments where I literally was like, I called the team as I was running up, and I was like, I'm like, we're stopping here. I'm done. Like, I'm not continuing on.
Yes.
And so, they were like trying to find me a bike, because the plan was, if I can't finish on foot, I'll finish on a bike. So they're trying to get me a city bike, trying to figure this out, and then I show up to each spot, and there are people there waiting, like cheering me on, who are ready to run with me. And I'm like, not only can I not let these people down, but I'm running for 50 people who literally, their families, their friends, their whoever would give their life to have them back for one day. And I was like, I will finish this for them. And it was a very tumultuous day, as of course it rained
yes.
the day. And, you know, it was just, you know, because my cameraman was like, my editor, my DP, you know, he's working very close with me. And he's like, you know, I just hope it rains a little bit, just, you know, like no one wants to watch a whole documentary of just running. You know, we got to see some different elements and some rain. And I'm like, I don't need rain. Like, I'm the one running. And well, he got his wish and it rained out of it. So.
Have you heard about Anchor? It's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. It's free, y'all. Free. There are creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. And Anchor will distribute your podcast for you, so it can be heard on platforms like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and so many more. It's everything you need to make a podcast all in one place. It's how I've made this podcast. So, have you got something you'd like to say? Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started today. Thanks for listening. The Last 10th podcast is a production of the Mindful Run Coaching and Training, and me, your host, Coach Pilar, with the help of great tools here on Anchor. If you like the show, remember you can listen on your desktop at anchor.fm. You can also listen on platforms like Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Radio Public, Spotify, and so many more. Now you can also view episodes on my new YouTube channel. Please feel free to leave me a message. I'd really love to hear your thoughts and feedback on the show, or even ideas for future guests. Don't forget to leave your thoughtful and positive review on Apple Podcasts. Apple makes it possible for so many people to find and listen to the show. Your reviews will help. Finally, if you really appreciate and love the stories and interviews that I've been sharing, please consider supporting the show. Click support on anchor.fm or in the Anchor app. A portion of the proceeds will always benefit my charity of choice. Oh my gosh. So many things. First, congratulations on
Thank you.
finishing that 50 miles. I can only imagine how challenging that it was. And then secondly, I think just thinking of how many people you brought together to do this, and when you say, like, if you didn't do it, it would have just been you, and to hold on to that would have just been like, no. So I'm so glad that you did go forward with it. That's amazing.
Thank you.
And then, I'm thinking about your mom, and I know that she just recently passed. It sounds like your mom was really integral in helping you to see this vision.
Yes.
Yeah.
She was basically the whole moving point of this, and this movie will be in honor of her and in her memory, because when she first went in the hospital, she passed away due to complications of COVID. She went into the hospital, and at first it wasn't that bad, and she went into the ICU, and it was like, as I was about to run this race, and I'm like, my God, like, I can't run this race if she's in the hospital doing this. And of course she's like, you have to do it, like do it, you know, and she's like, don't worry about me. And, you know, she said to me after I had finished the race, like, you know, I told her I completed the race. She couldn't talk that much because she was not very good with her breath. And she was like, I just kept saying to myself, like, I can't die right now. Nattalyee has to finish this race, and she won't finish it if I die right now.
Wow.
So I know my mom held on for a very long time for me so I could finish this race and finish this project. And I know it's going to catapult me to where I need to be. I know it's going to help normalize Black runners, and all because she kept telling me to change my documentary. And I kept being like, I'm not going to change it, Mom. This doesn't make sense. And it finally clicked. And I thank God every day that she told me to do that. And, you know, I just pray that this film in her memory gets the recognition, and she gets the recognition she deserves for having me change it to that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. She's like, she could just see much farther in than you could in that moment. Wow.
Absolutely.
Wow. So in the, not just in the making of the film, but in general, in your journey through running, in your journey in the 50 miler, in your journey in the marathon, all of those things, what would you say is the biggest challenge that you faced, and how did you overcome it?
I would say the biggest challenge probably was, I mean, outside of course, you know, the training and all that, like for someone who had never run a 50 miler and kind of, you know, I did work with a nutritionist who really helped me. And I worked with a trainer who helped train, like help me get, you know, my strength up. But, it's the mental that, you know, I feel like a lot of times people forget to talk about because, you can do all the trainings on your body in the world, but if you get out there and you're having a bad day, or you let something get to you in your head, because when you're 50 miles, it's you in the road, it's nobody else.
That's right.
So, I mean, you can have people around you, but even then, like, there was one person who ran 40 miles of it with me. And, you know, I had my crew there the whole time, but my crew was not running it with me the whole time.
That's right. That's right.
My cameraman, he actually did about 15 miles of it with me, just you know, on foot and skateboard and all that stuff. Like, shout out to Elijah.
Yeah.
But he was, the main cameraman who, like, was on foot, like, with me.
Yes.
As opposed to when we stopped places. But it's the mental part, because even when you're, like, you know, training for it and you have your long runs and stuff, it's like, oh, I'm running 13, 20 miles, whatever. But I think the farthest I ran before I did the actual race was 32 or 33 miles.
Wow.
So there were 18 miles I had not run that I had to add on that day.
Wow.
That I did the run. So, I mean, it truly comes down to mental grit.
Yes.
Because your body can do it. It's just your mind that's like, hell no.
Oh my God.
I know it's so cheesy to say it, you know, people, you know, it's so cheesy, but it's so real. Like, it just really comes down to your mental capacity and not giving up. Not to go another tangent, but I ran another 50 miler shortly after, and three times I came up to the like the tent or whatever, and I was like, yo, I'm gonna pull out. Yeah. You know, because I did 15 laps on the same course. Each lap was like a little over 3 miles. And I mean, if you want to talk about draining, seeing the same thing, you know, 15 laps in a row, and it's freezing outside. Yes. And, you know, and I'm like, I'm coming up there and they're like, oh, you have 5 laps left. In hindsight, that's actually not that much, but like 5 more laps of the same thing. Yes. It's like, oh my gosh, it was agony. And I had 2 laps left, and I was like, I can't do this. I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. Yeah. And, you know, the race director was like, you only have 2 laps left. And I'm like, only 2 laps left? What do you mean only 2 laps left? Like, I literally can pinpoint the little blades of grass on the ground right now and where they're at and what, like, degrees they're at right now. You know, and I was just like, oh my gosh. And she was just like, you know, sit down for a second and, like, eat some food. And, you know, you're also on a time crunch. It's like, you have to finish by a certain time. Because then I'm like, if I'm not going to finish in time, should I even keep going?
Yes.
But they were like pushing me forward, and it literally came down to, you have 2 laps left. Yes, it's a little over 6 miles,
Yes.
but it's like, it's down to your brain and you, because your body is not failing you. It's just your head.
Yes.
And I mean, thankfully they pushed me, because some race directors will be like, okay, bye, thank you. But they sayonara, I would have to give you a medal.
Here's your towel, and there's your car. There it is. Okay, go ahead.
So I was like, cool. But yeah, no, they were amazing, and oh my gosh, I thank the Lord for them. And I have to shout out Stephanie. She is a new up and coming race director, and she was just so positive, pushing on everybody. And that's why she's a person of color.
Yes.
And I feel like, I did another race. I did another marathon that was before that, leading up to it. And I've never had a DNF in my life. I've only had one.
Mm-hmm.
And the race director was white. And I came up to him and I was like, yo, I think I want to pull out. And they were like, okay, just train better next time. And I'm like, you're not even going to try and convince me to stay? Like, what? And then I'm at this race that's a 50-miler where they're probably like, we're good. Like, you can go. Every time I came around, they were like, keep going. You have this. Like, please don't give up. Keep pushing. Like, sit down and think about it before you give up. You're so close. And I'm just like, you know what? I want more people of color in charge, because you understood me. You kept me going. She could have easily been like, no. But she kept pushing me, as opposed to the other race where, in all actuality, it came down to, they didn't have any food there either. They didn't have any nutrition. That's another story for another day. But all I needed was some food. That's legitimately all I needed. Because once I ate, I was like, I could have finished this race.
Yes.
But instead of them trying to figure it out with me, they were like, train better next time. You can still get a medal. See you later. That's literally what they said to me. I was like, got it. Won't be back to this race.
That is so crazy. So crazy.
Truly.
Wow. I mean, I completely agree with you about the mental, the mental aspect of running. And it, as you said, it totally sounds cliche, to say it, but at the end of the day, that's really what it is. Your brain just needs to be in charge
mm-hmm.
of your body. Your brain just needs to keep your body moving forward, and your body will do that. Yeah. Wow. When you said, okay, I ran, my longest run was 32 miles and I still had 18 miles to go. My mind was just like, that puts 50 miles in perspective.
It really does.
I mean, because
it really does.
I remember when I trained for New York City was my first marathon in 2017. And I remember training, on training runs, like when I ran 10 miles, the first time I ran 10 miles. And that was, I still had 16 more miles to go. And my mind was just like, this is crazy. Like, I'm not even halfway through this little puppy at all at this point. And I've been running a long time. And, it's the same thing. It's crazy. Wow. So what was the second 50 miler that you did? Which one was that?
It was in Prospect Park in Brooklyn. It's the 50th year of they're the Prospect Park Track Club, and they had the 50th year anniversary last year, and so they did a 50 miler. Because when I did my 50 miler, I didn't have any medals or anything, and like I said, I'm a medal addict, and I was like, I want my buckle. I've never gotten a buckle, so I was like, I'm signing up for this, because if I'm going to be done with 50 milers, which, I don't think I will be, but let's say I am done, I at least got one buckle.
Theoretically.
Yeah.
Well, you will have to listen to the show that is before yours. Jamila Mujahid, she's done 100-mile ultras, 200-mile ultras, and she does them almost every weekend, 100 miles every weekend. What?
Good Lord, I
I know,
wish.
I know. But but like her thought process is that the way she described it was she was like, well, I just break it down into like 5 and 10 mile increments. She's like, if I did 10 miles, I can do 100 miles. So it's no big deal. And I'm just like,
Wow.
there you go.
Great way to look at that.
So I don't think you're done with 50 milers. I think you have a lot more left to do and to give in this ultra marathoning arena. And I cannot wait to see it. I cannot wait to see it. Man, amazing, amazing. So what skill, and it could be a running skill or just a life skill, do you think is invaluable for someone to have?
Just any skill in general, doesn't matter if
Yeah,
it's
it
running related.
doesn't have to be running
Oh yeah.
related. It could be anything.
I think a skill is communication.
Mm,
And I say communication because so many times, and I guess I am thinking of the running world right now, it
mm,
comes down to, I feel like, people get messed up or something happens or goes wrong or didn't go right. And in life too, because of communication, we didn't say anything. We just thought we could do it by ourselves. We kept it inside.
mm,
And I think communicating when there's a problem and communicating it right away
mm,
can help people problem solve and figure things out. And I also am a firm believer of, when I have a problem with someone or someone has a problem with me, we're not going to talk it out via social media. We're not going to talk it out via text. We will either talk on the phone or in person, because
mm.
so much is lost in translation through a text message or through social media. So if ever I have an issue or something arises, it's never a smart aleck email back or message back. It's a phone call like, hey, let me hear the tone of your voice so I actually understand what's happening, because I might be
Sure,
reading this wrong,
sure,
which has helped me so much in life. And I
sure.
think that has messed up so many people in life.
Absolutely. I agree with that 100%. I'm definitely a person who somebody sends an email and they annoy me. I'm definitely known for banging on the keys a little bit.
I
And
totally understand.
I need to reel it back in, I need to reel it back in. I usually, when that happens, I'm just like, I'm typing on my keyboard,
Hmm.
and I'm jamming away at that. I'm like, okay, so you should put that email away. and we'll
Completely understand.
and we'll come back to that. We'll come back to that later, and then we'll figure out what we're going to do. So, totally, totally. So, I want to go back to talking I want to talk a little bit more about normalizing uh, black runners. I want to talk a little bit more about that and what you envision for, because like I'm thinking about, you doing this ultra marathon, these 250 milers, but both in New York City, right? But when you go out
Hmm.
into the trail running world, black people not so much. so
Hmm.
so talk to me a little bit about, what you think that we might be able to do to normalize us being out there.
Yeah, I always say representation is key, and a photo truly is worth 1,000 words. It took me seeing a photo of a fat female black athlete. And I don't say fat in a derogatory way.
Yep.
Um,
I know what you mean.
it's just, there's people put so much shame with that word, and I'm like, there's no shame.
Mm.
If I'm fat,
It just is how
like
you are.
technically according to the BMI chart, I'm fat. And fat to me, people have tried to use that word to hurt people. And not that anyone's out here calling me fat or anything, mean, but if someone were to say that, I'm like, I mean, you described me. That doesn't hurt my feelings. Yes, I am a fat female black runner,
Mm.
and I want to see more pictures or videos or anything of people who look like me out there, men and women, because that's why on, my Instagram page, because I have one that's, just my personal account for everything,
Mm.
acting, whatever, but I also have my 50 Mile Run for Justice page, because I want people to see not only pictures of, me running, but just me on these streets, me protesting and seeing a Black woman out here doing it and showing people that they can do it. Because, like I said, it just takes someone accidentally on Instagram looking in the search bar and seeing something and being like, oh, I didn't know that someone like that was doing that. Maybe I can too. And that's literally what happened to me. Was me, someone reposting a Facebook article about, Myrna, the Myrnavator. And I remember watching it and like sobbing. So I was like, I didn't think there was space for me in the running world when I did start running. Because for me, it was just like, I'm going to run on the treadmill and, whatever. But seeing that video of her, I was like, wow, I really can go run these races and people won't judge me and look down on me.
Yes. Yes. I just was listening to Marcus, the Runner's, I think it's the Runner's Life, or I can't remember the specific name of his podcast, but he had it was actually Carolyn Sue and a Diverse Rerun panel, and they Marcus Brown hosted it on his podcast, and Sab Runs, that's her Instagram handle. She said something which I so agree with, which is you can't be what you can't see.
Yeah.
And I just
real.
thought that was so powerful, that it's so important for people of color, for LGBTQ people, for just anyone, whatever you happen to be and whatever you happen to identify as, to be able to see yourself reflected back in the world. Because if you can't see it, it's so hard to, as you said, to feel like there's space for me here. Yeah. Yeah. And I mean,
so real.
I thoroughly appreciate that you're creating space. Like, that to me is also equally important as the representation part, but creating spaces is also important. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Wow. Oh, you're amazing. Really.
Thank you. You are too.
I appreciate that. So, is there anything that I have not asked you that you might like to talk about or share? Yeah.
No, the only thing I guess I would say is the film will be out in the film festival season for the end of 2021, early 2022, and I will be putting it on all platforms, no matter what the outcome is of these festivals, just to help normalize Black runners. And the film is actually called The Race Against Race.
Ah, yes. Okay. Yes. Yes. So let's go back a little bit, because you said something that kind of piqued my interest. So what is the process once you have edited, cut, recut all the footage and put it together in this film? What's the process for putting it out into the world?
Yeah, so depending on how it does at festivals and getting picked up for anything, if it does not, no matter what, I will put it on YouTube and put it on different platforms so that people can see, try and get it into schools, because it's very educational. There's nothing that can't be seen by people. Some of those documentaries go a little too deep. But we're actually, I don't want to focus it on COVID. I don't want to focus it on, all the craziness of 2020. It's going to be about this run and what's happening and just normalizing Black runners. And we spoke with families of people who lost their lives to police brutality, and they came out and they spoke at this rally, and we, got so much footage from all the other cities who were involved and everything like that. So, and that's another reason why we're kind of waiting a little bit too to put it out there, because I don't want it to just be jumbled in with like, here's all the films that are about 2020.
Right.
This is bigger than 2020, and it happened in 2020, and part of it that, brought it up was what happened in 2020.
Sure.
But it's deeper than that, and it's bigger than that, and I don't want it to be kind of grouped with that whole situation. So we're waiting it out and just trying to perfect it too. So that, you know, by 2021, 2022, people still will remember what happened.
Absolutely.
And, you know, see it on its own as opposed to the COVID video, the George Floyd here situation.
That's right. I mean, it's a film, and the run was precipitated by the events of 2020. That's sort of like what propelled you to go forward to do it. But the message is far wider in that it's really just trying to say, we're Black, we run, we're here, get used to it.
Yeah. Basically.
You know what I'm saying? To put it in, you know, sort of those mantras that, you know, you have heard at so many protest, you know, those protest events. That's essentially what it's trying to do. Yeah. I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
So, Nattalyee, if you if you've ever been given advice, or if there's advice that you would like to give, what would it be?
The advice that I would give, which I've recently seen even in 2021, is you can put yourself in a position of power. No one stopped me from making a documentary and I became the director. I became, you know, executive producer. I became basically everything helming this film because I took a step out and I did it. So especially in those areas where there's maybe not a lot of representation or it's not happening, you can be the forefront. You can be the starter. You can be the leader. I know there might not be a map laid out of how to do it, but you're lucky that you get to create the map. And that's exactly what I'm doing right now. I've never directed a film. I've only, you know, as an actor, I've been in it and I've seen what's happening, but I've never, you know, fundraised for a film. I've never directed. I've never edited. I'm learning all new things just by trying something new. So if there's something you want to do, the only person stopping you is you. And that is truly what 2020 has taught me. So make your own map and be the creator of it, and people will then look at your map and follow you.
Nice. Great advice. Awesome. Nattalyee, thank you for taking the time to join me on the show today. I admire you so much. Wow. I don't even really have the words. You're amazing and powerful. And every time I talk with a guest on the show, and now of course you have really, you know, in 2021, I was like, maybe I might like to do an ultra. My husband's like, where are you going to train for that? So, I don't know, Nattalyee.
Where there's a will, there is a way.
So thank you so much for joining me on the show today.
Oh, of course. Thank you for inviting me.
I'd like to take a moment to thank Nattalyee for joining me on the show today. I really enjoyed learning about the 50-mile run for justice and protest, and I really look forward to watching the documentary, The Race Against Race, when it comes out in the near future. For you, my dear listeners, if you would like more information about the 50-mile run for justice and protest, I will link information in the show notes. If you'd like to connect with Nattalyee, I'll also put information about how to connect with her in the show notes as well. Don't forget that you can listen to the Last 10th podcast on many different listening platforms, such as Apple Podcasts, Anchor.fm on your desktop, Radio Public, and, of course, Google Podcasts and Spotify. We now have a YouTube channel, so you can watch episodes on YouTube. Just search for the Last 10th podcast. Remember to like and subscribe to our channel. For now, I am your host, Coach Pilar Arthur Sneed. I'll see you here again next week for another episode of The Last 10.